to clean up toxic air pollution from an industrial boiler or incinerator if that facility is emitting mercury or other toxic pollutants that are damaging babies' developing brains. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Connecticut rise? Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment. We should not be putting the interests of polluters before the health of our children. Numerous studies have demonstrated a link between increased exposure to industrial contaminants and impaired brain development or learning disabilities in children. For example, according to the Center for Disease Control, health effects linked to prenatal and childhood methylmercury exposure include problems with language, memory, attention, visual skills, and lower IQs. And exposure to mercury is particularly dangerous for pregnant and breastfeeding women, as well as children, since mercury is most harmful in the early stages of development. In some cases around the world, such as in Minamata, Japan, in the 1950s, we have seen exposure to industrial mercury sicken an entire generation of children. Mothers who exhibited no clinical symptoms of mercury poison gave birth to infants suffering from blindness, spasticity, and mental retardation. You know, we tend to think of an environmental catastrophe like Minamata could not happen here, but it could. Already in the United States, 1 in 6 women of childbearing age has blood mercury levels that exceed those considered safe by the EPA for a developing baby. This amounts to approximately 630,000 babies born every year at risk of developmental problems because of prenatal mercury exposure. While America's approximately 600 coal-fired power plants are the single largest source of mercury contamination in the United States, boilers and waste incinerators that burn mercury-containing products and chlorine manufacturers rank close behind. And yet it is now proposed that we delay, that we weaken the regulations protecting infants and children and allow these incinerators and boilers to continue spewing significant amounts of mercury pollution into the air every year, harming the health of our children and future generations of our children. It is unconscionable. And mercury is just one of the dangerous contaminants putting the development of children at risk. Exposure to lead threatens the health of young children and unborn babies in particular, can lead to miscarriage, preterm birth, low birth weight, and developmental delays. And that is why it was banned from gasoline and house paint by the EPA in the 1980s. These contaminants are deadly, which is why the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, put forward a rule to reduce them. In fact, the implementation of the Boiler Act would reduce mercury emissions from major source boilers and process heaters nationwide by 1.4 tons a year. It would also cut non-mercury metals, including lead, by 2,700 tons per year, hydrogen chloride by 30,000 tons per year, particulate matter by 47,000 tons per year, volatile organic compounds by 7,000 tons per year, and sulfur dioxide by 440,000 tons per year. According to the EPA, the benefits of reducing all of these dangerous emissions would outweigh costs by at least $20 billion a year. But even that aside, this act means 2,500 to 6,500 less premature deaths, 1,600 fewer cases of chronic bronchitis, 4,000 less heart attacks, 4,300 fewer hospital and emergency room visits, 3,700 fewer cases of acute bronchitis, 41,000 cases of aggravated asthma, 78,000 fewer cases of respiratory systems, and 310,000 fewer missed work days. And it means fewer cases of impaired brain development and learning disabilities in our children. So on one side of the equation, we have $20 billion in savings per year, cleaner air, thousands of fewer deaths, and the healthy development of our kids. On the other, we have polluters. We have polluters who want to just keep harming the health and the lives of Americans. I know what side I'm on, And I find it extraordinarily telling that this House majority would take the side of big polluters over the health and the welfare of America's children. I urge my colleagues, stand up for America's children, stand against big polluters, and support this amendment. And I yield back the balance of my time.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
To strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the Waxman Amendment and in opposition to this GOP bill. Mr. Chairman, all Americans should be concerned with the GOP push to roll back America's fundamental environmental protections and health protections. This GOP bill strikes at the heart of American values. We are not a smoggy third world country. This is the United States of America, and over the past decade since the passage of the Clean Air Act, businesses have flourished and the air and water has gotten cleaner. These are not mutually exclusive. That's why this GOP bill takes a step backward. It fundamentally weakens the Clean Air Act and grants unnecessary breaks to toxic air polluters. Now, Mr. Waxman's amendment is very important because it targets one of the most dangerous and toxic neurotoxins, that is mercury. We know that babies born to women exposed to mercury during pregnancy can suffer from a range of developmental and neurological problems, including delays in speaking and difficulties learning. Children suffering from the chronic effects of mercury exposure may never reach their full potential. This clearly has a profound impact on the affected children and their families, but it also has a long-term societal impact. And you know, it was in 1990 when the Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, amended the Clean Air Act and targeted the specific polluters coming from specific sources. These specific polluters, some of them created jobs, acted to bring in modern technology, the scrubbers. They took the mercury out of the air. There are many examples in my home state of Florida of these manufacturing plants and utilities that have taken the mercury out of the air by installing the up-to-date modern equipment. But there have been some businesses that have been very resistant to this, and they need to get with the program, because it has been since 1990 when the law has said it's time to clean it up. Now, what year is this? This is 2011. Now, I would offer that after 20 years, these businesses have been on notice that they can use the American know-how and modern technology to clean up their plants, just like a lot of their other competitors have done. Now, I've heard the argument that, boy, this is bad for business. But I'll tell you, coming from the state of Florida, clean air and clean water are good for business. Our tourism industry relies on clean water and clean air. And for the plants in the state of Florida that have cleaned up, it has really improved the commercial fishing industry, the recreational fishing industries, billion-dollar industries in my state. If the Congress had not acted in a bipartisan way decades ago to say we're going to clean up the air and the water, I don't think we'd have as many visitors coming to my beautiful state for their vacations and fishing. And fishing is important because we have so many that go out in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic or out in the Keys, and they fish and they bring it home to eat. Now, this is because mercury is not cleaned up to the greatest extent as we can clean it up. The Florida Department of Health has advised here, and I'm reading from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection Advisory. The Florida Department of Health has advised the public to limit their consumption of fish from hundreds of water bodies throughout the state due to unacceptable risk of mercury exposure. As a result, these water bodies have been listed as impaired for mercury. This doesn't mean it's unsafe, but it means that you can't go overboard. But you know what? We have the technology to continue to clean up so that people can eat all the great Florida seafood that is available to them. There's no reason to take a step backward. Other businesses have done this. They have cleaned up. So earlier this year, after a decade of analysis and work by the EPA and interaction with businesses and other stakeholders all across the country, the EPA finalized standards to cut emissions of mercury and other toxic air pollution from these particular polluters. Their goal was to finally put these rules into effect this coming April. But unfortunately, we're running into opposition from the most anti-environmental Congress in the history. People, this amendment is straightforward. It states that the bill does not stop EPA from taking action to clean up toxic air pollution from these particular sites. If that facility is emitting mercury and other toxic pollutants, we're not going to proceed. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment.
For what purpose, gentlelady from Washington rise? Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise in support of this legislation, the underlying legislation unamended, because it's going to protect and grow jobs, both in my region and across the country. You know, in my district in southwest Washington, it's home to thousands of private forest landowners. Whether it's a family farm or private business, such as Weyerhaeuser, which is one of our region's largest businesses and employers, we have pulp mills, paper mills, and an emerging biomass industry. And what all these things have in common? They all provide tens of thousands of jobs, good family wage jobs, to the folks in my region. And they're all part of the forest products industry that has long been the cornerstone of southwest Washington's economy. You know, and if we don't pass this underlying bill unamended, they will all shed those thousands of jobs in southwest Washington. How many are we talking about? Well, a recent study shows that about 18% of those jobs would be lost. Those who produce pulp and paper would be laid off by this onerous Boiler MAC rule, as it's written. Those are blue-collar families. Those are family wage jobs. They're the ones that would pay the price for this if we do not act now to protect the environment where jobs can grow. You know, the ripple effects in related industries in our region and across the country would be an additional 87,000 jobs lost if we do not act and pass this bill. In a place like Cowlitz County in my district, where more than 1 out of every 10 moms and dads are out of work, the effect of this rule, if we don't fix it, and we don't fix it soon, would further devastate an already devastated economy. In August, 89,000 jobs were created. They were added nationwide. So basically, if we don't move now, we're going to wipe out the entire month of August's growth. That's going to put our economy backwards, not forwards. And make no mistake, Mr. Speaker, that's one thing the current majority in the House is about. It's creating jobs for the men and women at home to make sure they can provide for their families and their kids' college education, their health care, so on and so forth. It's the American dream. Let's pass this bipartisan piece of legislation today without this amendment. It won't add to the deficit, and it's going to preserve those jobs. For those folks who are struggling in my home region, southwest Washington, and across the country. Let's give the EPA the time it's requested to rewrite the rule in a common sense way. You know, the great thing about this is our environment and our economy, they don't have to be mutually exclusive, which is why we're taking a balanced approach to changing this rule. It's why I am assuming that's part of the reason the EPA wants more time to rewrite it, because they've had the feedback. Yes, we can innovate and create and reduce, and I support reducing whatever type of emissions we're producing as a nation. We need to go there, but we need to do it in a common sense way that doesn't just handicap the economy at a time when we need it to grow. So let's give the EPA that time that they've requested, so that facilities like Longview Fiber and Longview, Washington won't have to lay any more people off. With this legislation, we can protect our environment and protect American jobs. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose, the gentlelady from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of the amendment.
Gentlelady move to strike the last word.
I do.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I just said, I rise in support of this amendment. I think it's a very, very important one. The bill nullifies the EPA's rules to require boiler and incinerators to reduce their emissions of toxic mercury. That's really quite a sentence. It requires, the rules require that boiler and incinerators to reduce their emissions of toxic mercury. And in doing so, this bill nullifies the mercury reductions in our country that would have been achieved, and it indefinitely delays, not just for a given time frame, it's indefinite, indefinitely delays the implementation of any replacement standards that EPA issues. Now, my friend Mr. Whitfield said earlier today that the bill does not provide for an indefinite delay of any new rules. That's false. It's false. The bill clearly states that facilities have at least 5 years to comply without any hard deadline for compliance. That's the definition of an indefinite delay. Our Republican colleagues also claim that mercury pollution from dirty boilers and incinerators do not harm public health. That's quite a stand. That is quite a stand. I think it's terrifying myself in a civilized society that this is not going to damage anyone in their health. They blame China, even though the U.S. facilities are emitting toxic mercury pollution from smokestacks right here within our borders. I acknowledge that there is some that does come from China. Are we going to replicate China? I don't think that's the gold standard for our country. The mercury released here at home is just as toxic as mercury released anywhere. That's how toxic it is. Ours is not less toxic because it's U.S. It's the same horrible, dangerous stuff. And how toxic is it? You know, if there are a lot of things under attack here in the House of Representatives, but I think one of the most serious attacks is the attack on science. We're coming up with a lot of political science for underlying legislation. Listen to what the National Academy of Sciences has said. They stated unequivocally that mercury is a powerful neurotoxin. The National Academy of Sciences has stated that mercury is highly toxic. They state, and I quote, "Exposure to mercury can result in adverse effects in several organ systems throughout the lifespan of humans and animals. There are extensive data on the effects of mercury on the development of the brain in humans." The National Academy of Sciences has also stated that exposure to mercury can cause mental retardation, cerebral palsy, deafness, blindness in children exposed in utero, and sensory and motor impairment in exposed adults. This is stunningly shocking. This is not Republican pollution, Democratic pollution. This is something that will harm our people. Why would we not protect them? Why would we not protect them? And the National Academy of Sciences said again, and I quote, "Chronic, low-dose prenatal mercury exposure has been associated with impacts on attention, fine motor function, language, and verbal memory." The National Academy of Sciences has stated that prenatal mercury exposure has, quote, "the potential to cause irreversible damage to the developing central nervous system." But our Republican friends say we shouldn't worry about mercury pollution from boilers, incinerators, cement kilns, and power plants. I know who I trust, and it's not the phony baloney political science around here. I'll put my money any day on what the National Academy of Sciences says. They are the gold standard in our country. This is not something to be fooled around with. This is a huge danger to our people. This amendment is straightforward. It states that the bill does not stop EPA from taking action to clean up toxic air pollution from an incinerator or a chemical plant or a manufacturing plant with a dirty boiler, if that facility is emitting mercury or other toxic pollutants. I urge my colleagues to vote for the amendment, and I yield back.
For the purpose, the gentlelady from Michigan rise.
Speaker, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, we certainly all understand that our economy is struggling, that millions of Americans can't find a job, too many families are struggling to make ends meet, and that the American people are very frustrated that Washington is simply not doing enough to get our economy moving. And I would argue that not only is Washington not doing enough to get our economy moving, but it is actually harming the efforts of American innovators, of manufacturers, of small businesses, of the job creators, because of government overregulations. And the fact is today that the Obama administration has publicly listed almost 220 new regulations just this year alone. That's a 15% increase in 1 year alone of new regulatory actions under consideration. Each one of them is estimated to cost at least $100 million each, if you can imagine. Mr. Speaker, the bill that's currently under consideration would provide relief from some of the new EPA regulations that would cost American job creators more than $14 billion and threaten over 230,000 jobs. In my home state of Michigan, this government overregulation would cost nearly $800 million and put nearly 13,000 jobs at risk. Mr. Speaker, in my home state of Michigan, we are on our knees economically, and we cannot tolerate this anymore. It has to be stopped. At home, I have talked to so many business people, from small family businesses to major corporations, etc. The message from all of them is always the same, that government overregulation is absolutely killing their efforts to grow and to create jobs. I'll give you one example. There's a company in Port Huron, Michigan, in my congressional district called Domnar Company. And Port Huron has been hit particularly hard. The current estimates are that the unemployment rate is in the 20 percentile. If you can imagine that. And it's unbelievable how bad it is there at this time. Domtar is a paper company. It currently employs 245 people. It generates between $8 to $12 million in revenue annually. And they estimate, I talked to them about this regulation under consideration today, they estimate that this regulation today would cost them $9 million to scrub the coal that they use to operate their boilers, and would cost $3 to $4 million to convert to natural gas, and have an additional annual cost of $3 to $4 million a year just to stay compliant. And they estimate that these costs would likely force the company to shut down 2 of their 4 paper machines, of course, forcing a reduction in jobs, Mr. Speaker. This company, this community, this nation cannot handle that kind of loss and additional jobs that this regulation would force. It seems today that the 3 most feared letters to American job creators, where it used to be IRS, today those letters are EPA. It's no longer the IRS, it's now the EPA. And why is that? Well, on April 30th of 2010, the EPA issued a statement on a study of impact. They were studying the impact of one of their proposed regulations. This is what they said. The regulatory impact assessment does not include either qualitative or quantitative estimation of the potential effects of the proposed rule on economic productivity, economic growth, employment, job creation, or international economic competitiveness. In other words, they don't care what their regulations have to do with job creation, much less stifling and killing job creation in this country. This is what our own government is doing to our job creators. And this is from an administration who claims that job creation is its #1 priority. Are you kidding? You've got to be kidding. We have to stop putting all of this government regulation on killing jobs. And certainly House Republicans have been trying to lift the boot of big government off the necks, off the throats of job creators and of workers who are looking for a job. And we've heard repeatedly from this president about the need to invest in infrastructure, in transportation infrastructure. At the same time, this president and this administration is talking about how infrastructure is such an economic lifeblood for our economy, which I agree with and I think House Republicans agree with. But at the same time the president is saying we got to invest in infrastructure and fixing roads, his administration is moving forward on this regulation that we are talking today that would put large segments of the American concrete, of the cement plants in this country out of business. And I would tell the president it's very hard to have infrastructure investment to build roads if you don't have any concrete, if you don't have any cement. I would say, Mr. Speaker, I speak against this amendment, but I speak in favor of the underlying bill, and I would call on my colleagues to pass this bill now. Pass this bill. Let's get America moving again. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Massachusetts rise?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Waxman Amendment. Today, we are taking up yet another bill that continues the GOP majority's ongoing attack on public health. This bill seeks to gut EPA rules requiring reductions in emissions of toxic air pollutants, including mercury, from industrial boilers and incinerators. Industrial boilers and incinerators are among the largest sources of mercury pollution in the country, a potent brain poison that can cause severe developmental problems in children and toddlers. According to the National Academy of Sciences, even in low doses, mercury can tragically affect a child's development, delaying walking and talking and causing learning disabilities. Children suffering from the chronic effects of mercury exposure may never reach their full potential. This is simply unacceptable, especially when we have the technology to address it. The Waxman Amendment is straightforward. It says that the bill cannot stop the EPA from taking action to clean up toxic air pollution from an industrial boiler or incinerator if that facility is emitting mercury or other toxic pollutants that are damaging to children's developing brains. I urge my colleagues to support this common sense amendment and stand up for the health of our children and grandchildren. Thank you, and I yield back.
What purpose does the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as a physician, a mother, and a person of a racial minority, which often bears the disproportionate impacts of pollution, I rise in opposition to 2250 as well as 2861, which just passed, and in strong support of the Waxman Amendment, which I urge every colleague to support. Both bills, H.R. 2861 and H.R. 2250, essentially wipe out EPA's regulations, first of cement kilns, now industrial boilers and incinerators, and it would have serious public health impacts because it would allow high emissions of dangerous pollutants that would cause more asthma, heart attacks, birth defects, impaired brain development, which I'll come back to, and other illnesses at a time when we're working to improve the health of all Americans, reduce health care costs, and we're already struggling to remain competitive. All EPA is asking these entities to do is to meet the best existing standards in their industry, existing standards that they've had years to meet. Mr. Chairman and colleagues, allowing these regulations to go forward is critical because these entities emit lead, arsenic, particulate matter, and other toxic substances, especially mercury. So if the Republican majority and proponents of this bill have their way, we will see more than 15,000 more cases of aggravated asthma, over 1,500 more heart attacks, over 600 more cases of chronic bronchitis every year, and we'll also have over 100,000 additional missed working days, which means lost productivity, all at a time when we're trying to improve the health of all Americans, as I said, and improve American competitiveness. But most importantly, the large boilers and incinerators are the second largest source of mercury, which, as you've heard, is a grave risk to our children both before and after birth, especially on their brain development, which makes these bills especially dangerous to the public health and can damage the learning and thus the social and economic potential of our children. And mercury stays in the environment for a long time. As an African American, I have to be particularly concerned. With more than 60% of polluting industries located in or near minority communities, it is clear that the learning and other neurologic deficiencies caused by mercury would primarily impact our communities. This not only ought to concern African Americans, Latinos, Asians, and American Indians, whose children would be more likely to be impaired, it should be of concern to all of us. All the time spent on this bill and the other bill that was just passed, that the House Majority Leadership knows are going nowhere, is a pure waste of time, also a waste of money. I guess it's not important because it's being used to try to kill programs they've never liked. and also they probably think it could hurt President Obama if it doesn't pass. And it also protects the big corporations. Beyond that, it creates no jobs. It just creates the potential to cause more sickness and premature death, to damage the potential of our children, and therefore damage our country's potential as well. The claims of lost jobs, I believe, are highly exaggerating. Bringing and pushing these extremely misguided and dangerous bills says that the proponents are willing to put our country and the future of their and our constituents, their and our children, at risk. I ask my colleagues to vote for this amendment. This amendment that protects the public health will save our children from a life that would not be what we would want for them, one in which they might not be able to enjoy all of the benefits of this country or fully realize their potential or the American dream. Please support this amendment, reject the underlying bill, and all of the bills that attempt to weaken the EPA. Vote instead for our children, our grandchildren, and this country. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose, the gentleman from Kentucky rise.
Last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
A number of speakers on the other side have indicated that if our legislation passes, new regulations relating to Boiler Act would be put off indefinitely. And I would like to clarify and point out that in Section 3 on page 6 of this bill, it says for each regulation promulgated pursuant to this legislation, the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency shall, not may, shall establish a date for compliance. So this is not being put off indefinitely. It explicitly says shall. Now, during the hearings that we've had, extensive hearings on this Boiler Act that was adopted by EPA in 2004, which was invalidated by the courts because of lawsuits filed by environmental groups. A typical testimony was this: the EPA final rules impose unrealistic and very costly requirements that EPA has not justified by corresponding environmental and health protection from reductions of hazardous air pollutants. And as just a practical example of what I'm talking about, many universities, in order to comply with that 2004 rule, spent large sums of money. The University of Notre Dame spent $20 million to comply with that rule, which has now been invalidated, and EPA has come out with an even more stringent rule that's going to cost a lot more money to be spent. So we genuinely believe that EPA has the health standards in effect that can protect our children. There's nothing in this bill that's going to change any of that. But we know that if these universities continue to spend that kind of money on regulations that are invalidated and then have to come back and spend more money, tuition costs are going to go up, which makes it more difficult for some children to go to college. So this simply is a common sense approach, a balanced approach, saying, EPA, go back, revisit this issue, 15 months come out with a new regulation, and the EPA administrator shall set a compliance date not sooner than 5 years after the final rule. But we've also heard a lot of discussion today about mercury. And yes, we're all concerned about mercury. But EPA itself, in developing the benefits of their regulation that we're trying to postpone, did not assign $1, 1 dime, or 1 penny of benefit for the reduction of mercury emissions. And the reason they didn't, because there was not enough reduction. Because we've already cleaned up the air a great deal relating to mercury. All of the benefits that they calculated from their rule came from reduction of particulate matter. And in fact, they said the mercury reductions would be less than 0.03% of global emissions. And we've heard all sorts of testimony about mercury, that 90% or so of mercury comes from nature or from sources outside of the U.S. So I don't think we need to be alarmist about this. This is simply an approach to, hey, our economy is pretty weak right now. We're losing a lot of jobs. We're having difficulty creating jobs. So, look, let's just go back, look at this, 15 months, come back with a new regulation, set a date for compliance, and let's move forward. I don't think that anyone can make a credible, verifiable argument that we're out to destroy every young person in America, every child in America. As a matter of fact, we have a lot of Democrats on this bill. There's been a similar bill introduced to this on the Senate side with Democratic support. So I would urge all the members to defeat the the Waxman Amendment and support our underlying legislation 2250, and yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose, the gentlewoman from Maryland rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I was going to speak about mercury, and I'll get to that, but I really have to clarify for the record and the public record. We keep hearing, and we've heard once again on this floor from our Republican colleagues, that the bill won't harm public health or weaken health standards, and this is just not accurate. And it's really important, Mr. Chairman, for the public to understand that. In fact, Section 2 of the bill lists 4 final clean air rules and says they shall have, and I quote, no force or effect. Section 3 of the bill eliminates the 3-year compliance deadline in the Clean Air Act, and doesn't set any new deadline. And for the record, Section 5 of the bill directs EPA to set weaker standards than the clean air requirements. And so make no mistake, H.R. 2250, contrary to what the other side is saying, has real legal effect and consequence. And those effects weaken our protections from air pollution and harm the health of Americans, especially our children. Now, I recognize that there is a zeal for deregulation. But for clean air standards, for clean water standards, this really makes no sense. In fact, the bill throws out EPA's rules to require boilers and incinerators to reduce their emissions of toxic mercury. And unlike the statements that have been made on this floor, this comes in the wake of a bill to nullify EPA's rules to clean up cement kilns, and yet another bill to nullify EPA's rules to clean up power plants. When does it stop? When does the public health and the consequences of these actions become important to the American people instead of just this move to deregulation? Just this last month, the Republicans have pushed legislation to let the nation's largest source of toxic mercury pollution off the hook for cleaning up their emissions, jeopardizing public health. And for what? Now, I've heard that we shouldn't have so much concern about mercury, but somebody in this House, somebody in this Congress has to be concerned about the public health consequences to our children of toxic mercury emissions. They also cite studies from the American Forest and Paper Association, from the Council of Industrial Boiler Owners, and these are nothing more than industry studies that seek to absolve the industry from cleaning up its own mess. They've been refuted by actual scientists, and I suggest that on this floor we actually pay attention to science and facts and not just a move to deregulate because we're interested in doing industry a favor at the expense of public health. And we know that contrary to what's been said, the public health consequences of mercury are clear, they're stated, they're facts, they're science. So let's not undercut that. Mercury is a powerful neurotoxin. It harms developing brains of infants. It leads to learning disabilities. It causes attention deficits and behavioral problems and a whole range of other problems. And so the Republicans cannot be allowed, Mr. Chairman, to pick and choose their facts and their science. The facts and the science are as they are, and we should not be nullifying EPA's rules that protect the public health. And with that, I yield, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this amendment. And by the way, I believe we should be alarmist. And I am an alarmist. And maybe that's because I'm a mother. Maybe that's because I'm a grandmother. And maybe that's because I represent Los Angeles, which has some of the worst air in this country. Just last year in California, we had 2,400 deaths because of cargo-related pollution. We're paying for the cost of people all over this country getting goods on time in their local stores. Because of cargo-related pollution, there's about 350,000 days of lost school. That is a real problem for this country. Pollution does impact our children. Pollution does impact their lives. We know even there's 1 million days of lost work, lost productivity in this country because of pollution-related illnesses in the workplace. And I'm for this amendment because the underlying bill nullifies EPA's rules to require boiler and incinerators to reduce their emissions of toxic mercury. And this comes in the wake of a bill to nullify EPA's rules to clean up cement kilns, and another bill to nullify EPA's rules to clean up power plants. Just within the last month, my colleagues on the other side have pushed legislation to let the nation's largest sources of toxic mercury pollution off the hook for cleaning up their emissions. And they defend this policy by pointing to these industry studies about the cost of complying with these rules. One study that gets cited over and over is a study by the Council of Industrial Boiler Owners, or CIBO. This study, by the way, has been completely discredited. For example, the nonpartisan Congressional Research Service examined this study and concluded, quote, "The base of CIBO's analysis is flawed. As a result, little credence can be placed in CIBO's estimate of job losses." They also cite a study by the American Forest and Paper Association concluding that the boiler rules will cost jobs. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Charles Kolstad, chair of the Department of Economics at the University of California, Santa Barbara, reviewed this analysis and said, quote, "If I were grading this, I would give it an F. The economics is all wrong." Dr. Kolstad described the methods as, quote, "fundamentally flawed," and he said that as a result, the jobs estimate were completely invalid. And we know that the National Academy of Sciences and independent public health experts around the world have proven time and again that mercury is a powerful neurotoxin that harms the developing brains of infants, leading to learning disabilities, attention deficits, behavioral problems, and a range of other problems. This amendment is straightforward. It states that the bill does not stop EPA from taking action to clean up toxic air pollution from an industrial boiler or incinerator if that facility is emitting mercury or other toxic pollutants that are damaging babies' developing brains. Who can vote against this? You know, we talk about jobs. My colleague, Ms. Miller, earlier talked about jobs and the economy and the cost of the regulations. But at what price do we have to pay for the next generation's health and quality of life? And by the way, the last time I checked, adding more pollution into the air is not a jobs plan.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. For what purpose, gentleman from Virginia rise?
Strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I listened to the lady with interest, and of course it's easy to sit in Washington and whatever group you may be with to say, well, this group is wrong or that group is wrong, and everybody can trot out their experts. But ladies and gentlemen, you know, the CRS doesn't own and operate boilers. Businesses do. Lots of them are going to be impacted by this, big businesses, small businesses, and the people who work for them. Last week I referenced a letter to the editor of the Virginian Leader sent in by Mr. and Mrs. Kinney, in which they said, and I quote, "I'm going to be very blunt with the following opinion. As a factory worker and taxpayer, I'm getting sick and tired of these federal agencies who have nothing better to do except sit in their Washington offices and draw up rules and regulations to kill American jobs. Why don't they get off their sorry behinds and go out across the nation and try to help industry save what jobs we have left? And who is paying the EPA people's salary? We are, the American workers. I believe in protecting the environment, but we can't shut the whole country down to achieve it." I referenced that letter last week, and then I referenced Giles County in my comments in a Republican radio address later last week. And as a response to that, Mr. and Mrs. Kinney wrote again to the Leader. And we're not talking about big business here. We're talking about businesses that affect the employees in small counties all across this country. The Leader, for example, has 5,010 subscribers, not a giant newspaper. But the Kinneys wrote back in and they said, as I stated in the 9/21/11 letter to the editor, I'm a blue-collar factory worker with limited education, and I have worked for our county's largest employer for nearly 35 years. The only reason I'm speaking out on this issue is this: to get others involved. Our economic future and way of life here in Giles County could be on the line unless residents, business owners, civic organizations, and others come together and support H.R. 2250. You know what, ladies and gentlemen, the people of America understand that the EPA is in fact killing jobs. They understand that while we have to have a clean environment, and we all want a clean environment, as the gentleman from Kentucky said earlier today, we can do that. This is a reasonable approach. H.R. 2250 is a very reasonable approach which will do both. Continue us on the regulatory path, but make sure those regulations are reasonable and effective, and to make sure that we protect the jobs of the United States of America while we go forward in protecting the environment as well. And I yield back my time, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman. Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose? The gentleman from California rise.
Strike the last word.
Is there objection? Hearing none, gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I just want to point out to my colleagues that what the bill does is repeal the FDA's previous regulation, and then prohibits EPA from adopting another regulation for 15 months. And then when they adopt another regulation, it can't be enforced for another 5 years. And then there's no deadline, but meanwhile they lower the standard for EPA in setting that regulation. EPA is in the process now of negotiating with the industry to work out the information and the problems that have been brought to their attention. We ought to give EPA the chance to do that and get the full input from the industry. If legislation is needed, we ought to consider what legislation is needed. The approach of this bill is to set us back enormously when you don't have anything in place but the weakest possible criteria, and then nothing can happen for 5 years, and maybe even longer because it takes 15 months to get the regulation, no enforcement 5 years after that, and maybe never. That's not a reasonable approach. If the industry wants a law, the industry ought to work on telling us what they need and not going on this escapade with the Republicans who would like to repeal the whole Clean Air Act, repeal the ability for the EPA to protect the public from toxic pollution. And of course the amendment that's before us is that insofar as this bill becomes law, when we're talking about poisoning children's brains, we're not going to stop EPA from getting their regulations in place and getting them enforced. It's obscene to think of the idea that we would wait 15 and another 6.5 years and maybe longer before we can do anything to start down the road to reduce the pollution that's going to poison these kids. I ask for an aye vote on the amendment, and I hope that people realize this is a bill that will pass the House, but in my view, given the President's statement of a veto, it's not going to become law. I'm ready for the previous question on the amendment.
Back the balance of his time. Question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion Chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman,
gentleman from
I ask
California.
for a roll call vote.
Roll call is requested pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed. For what purpose, the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Rush of Illinois.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, let us not be distracted by this confused, backward, and short-term thinking on the part of my Republican colleagues. This bill represents just another attack on the nation's long-standing environmental protection laws in general, and the EPA in particular, on behalf of a select few polluting industries that are operating under the assumption that the timing is right to permanently alter, gut, and obliterate the Clean Air Act. The law that the chairman of the subcommittee admitted earlier in his testimony, the law that he said earlier is working on behalf of the American people. While most businesses have been planning and preparing for these rules, which have already been delayed for years, and in some cases have been delayed over a decade, some of the more opportunistic, dirty industries see this radical Republican majority and their radical agenda targeting the EPA and all of our clean air laws as the perfect time to try and permanently alter the Clean Air Act. Section 5 of H.R. 2250 disregards the clean air standards that will help reduce toxic air pollution like mercury and soot from some of our nation's biggest polluters, cement plants, industrial boilers, and incinerators. Instead, this section will make fundamental and damaging changes to the Clean Air Act and will ensure that future standards do not meaningfully reduce emissions into the air. So, Mr. Speaker, I must that will clarify that Section 5 of H.R. 2250 is intended to supplement the provisions of and shall not be construed to supersede any requirement, limitation, or other provision of Sections 112 and 129 of the Clean Air Act. This single provision in Section 5 will have the effect of exempting incinerators, exempting industrial boilers, and exempting cement plants from maximum reductions in toxic air pollution emissions, in contrast to every other major industrial source of toxic air pollution in this nation. The majority, even after being asked repeatedly, over and over and over again, to explain why Congress should carve out exemptions for the nation's dirtiest polluters in total disregard to the public health of the American people and at the expense of those very companies that have already invested in the technology to meet the minimum requirements of this law. Mr. Speaker, if it is truly the majority's intent to clarify the rules and to provide certainty for business, then this amendment will accomplish that purpose. But I don't believe that that is their intent, and I don't believe that that is what their goal and objectives are. They have a singular purpose in all of these bills that we have been debating on this floor as it relates to the Clean Air Act, and that is to completely nullify and gut the Clean Air Act so that the polluters in this nation can keep on polluting the very air that we breathe. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge all of my colleagues to support my amendment, and with that, I yield back the balance. I yield to the ranking member.
I thank you for yielding to me. I want to join you in urging support for this amendment. Maybe whatever the motivation is of the Republicans, I ask unanimous consent for one additional minute.
Is there objection? Without objection, gentleman is recognized for one additional minute.
Whatever the motivation is for the legislation, I can understand your reason for being very skeptical. I share it. But the industry, what the industry should want is regulatory certainty. And this bill adds more confusion to what is already a long overdue effort to reduce toxic air pollution from boilers and incinerators. No timeline for implementation of new emission standards. The bill creates significant questions about how EPA would set limits for toxic air pollution. If they think it's regulatory certainty, they don't have to do anything for years. They better not count on it. And if they wanted regular certainty, they better come forward and work something out. In the meantime, your clarification provides the certainty, and I urge members to support it. Yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
Claim time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The gentleman's amendment would simply add an additional paragraph at the end of Section 5 of our bill, and basically it would say that Section 5 in our bill would not be construed to supersede any requirement, limitation, or other provision of Sections 112 and 129 of the Clean Air Act. And because his amendment would say it does not supersede is the reason that we want to oppose the amendment. Now, Section 5 says this, and this is what we want to supersede Section 112 and 129 of the Clean Air Act. In promulgating rules, the administrator shall ensure that emission standards for existing and new sources established under Section 112 or 29 can be met under actual operating conditions consistently and concurrently with emission standards for all other air pollutants regulated by the rule for the source category, taking into account variability in actual source performance, source design, fuels, input, controls, ability to measure the pollutant's emissions, and operating conditions. In other words, we want to be sure that can be met under actual operating conditions. And then the second part of our Section 5 that we want to be sure supersedes, which this amendment would not allow, is that we put in Section 5 the President's own executive order in which he says that the administrator shall impose the least burdensome regulation consistent with the purposes of the Act. So all we're doing in Section 5 is saying we want to make sure that it is the least burdensome pursuant to the President's own executive order, and that we want to be sure that it can be met in actual operating conditions. And so for that reason, we would respectfully oppose the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Illinois. Gentleman, Mr. Rush. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Speaker,
The amendment is not agreed to.
on that, I ask for a roll call vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Illinois will be postponed. Who seeks recognition? What purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
I have an amendment on the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 15, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Ms. Hahn of California.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I'm offering an amendment that will preserve the critical air pollution protections for the places that they are needed most. For the people of my district, air pollution is a major health problem. The Los Angeles region always is near the top of the nation's worst air quality rankings. Unfortunately, the people of my district don't need to read the statistics from the American Lung Association to know that there's a pollution problem in our community. They see it in the dark soot that seeps into the homes of families living near the Port of Wilmington. They see it in the labored breathing of a little girl in Lomita staying home from school because of asthma. They see it in the tears of loved ones in San Pedro, burying someone lost before their time to cancer or lung disease. But the statistics are there too. In Los Angeles, 6 to 7% of all children have asthma, higher than the national average, and disproportionately impacting minority children. When our kids can't run around outside to exercise, when they're missing school with asthma, we're creating all sorts of other health and educational deficits. Los Angeles has recognized its air quality problems. Since the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990, we've made dramatic air quality improvements. In the last decade, we've managed to reduce particulate pollution levels in Los Angeles by 40%. We cannot afford to go backwards. That's why I'm offering this amendment today. My amendment would ensure that the Environmental Protection Agency will keep their higher standards of clean air protections for the 10 metropolitan areas with the worst air quality. The American Lung Society lists the 10 worst regions with year-round particulate matter. They are Bakersfield, Delano in California, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Riverside in California, Visalia, Porterville in California, Phoenix, Mesa, Glendale in Arizona, Hanford, Corcoran in California, Fresno, Madera in California, Pittsburgh, Newcastle, Pennsylvania, Birmingham, Hoover, Cullman in Alabama, Cincinnati, Middleton, Wilmington in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Modesto in California, and Louisville, Jefferson County, Elizabethtown, Scottsburg in Kentucky and Indiana. I believe that the underlying bill is a giant step backwards for those communities and for the air quality and the environment of people living in this country. My amendment solely focuses on trying to continue to protect people in communities with the worst air quality standards. These communities cannot afford to have lower standards that will result in more asthma, more cancer. By protecting our public health, we will not lose jobs. It's a false premise that to create jobs we need to hurt our nation's environment and health. For example, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach were able to improve air quality and create jobs and industry. These ports are the economic engine of this country. I call them America's ports. They take in about 44% of all the cargo in this country comes through those ports. And a lot of people said you can't have clean air and good jobs. But let me tell you what really happened. We cut port pollution by 70% since 2005 without losing a single job. I'll say that again, a 70% reduction in pollution at the cost of 0 jobs. In fact, the green industry jobs were spawned, creating more jobs. Our more vigorous environmental standards in California aren't stopping the facilities in my district from thriving. That's why I find it so upsetting that under the banner of protecting jobs, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are moving to delay or destroy the protections that ensure our children can grow up breathing clean air. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle claim making our air dirtier is a way to stimulate the economy. But a peer-reviewed Cal State Fullerton study found that dirty air in the Los Angeles air basin cost residents $22 billion a year in health costs, premature death, lost days of work, lost days at school, $22 billion a year wasted because of dirty air. I reject the false choice between good jobs and clean air. We've already proved that they can go hand in hand with Clean Air Action Plan at the Port of Los Angeles. I also want to add that environmental regulations are not topping the list of problems that small districts in my community are saying. Last week, I met with over 50 small businesses, and they said they need more access to capital, not less regulations. I yield back my time.